Another Football Friday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, here with a slightly different version of our football coverage team from somewhere in Moore, Oklahoma. I guess his home. OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Hi, Ryan.
How's it going?
Good. From the office, en route to his planned interviews up at Thunderville, columnist Barry Trammell. And also from the office, I think her very desk, columnist Jenny Carlson.
Correct.
Guys, let's start off talking about Bedlam. Barry, you started it today. Had an interesting look at what we know so far about the Bedlam partners because they played the same three teams. So let me ask you, what's the most meaningful thing we can take out of those three common opponents that OU and OSU have played through the first 3 weeks of the Big 12 Conference?
Yeah, OSU beat them all. OU didn't. I mean, everything else is just details. The name of the game is winning. When you win 55-0, you build up a lot of data and good stats, but you'd rather be OSU and win 3 squeakers. So we'll see if that Texas loss, that losing to Texas is going to hang over Oklahoma till their dying day. We'll see if it costs the Sooners in any tangible way other than just knowing that you blew one.
Jenny, are you with Barry on the just win baby approach to this, or is there something more to the way OU beat Kansas State at Kansas as opposed to, say, how OSU had to come back and beat the Wildcats in Stillwater?
Well, I'm actually still scratching my head over both games, to be quite honest with you, because K-State came out, did what K-State does. They ran the quarterback. Then they had a quarterback get injured, brought in their fifth-string guy. And the Oklahoma State defense, which a week earlier had played so well at Texas against a much better quarterback run game, just looked completely out of sorts. It was really a confusing first half in Stillwater, almost as confusing as the turnaround we saw out of the Sooners last week in Manhattan. How could they go from playing so poorly against Texas to playing so well against Kansas State? So I still think consistency is a real question with both of these teams, more so with Oklahoma because they lost a game that they didn't play well. So I think both teams still have a lot to improve on, namely being consistent throughout games. We've seen both of them have pretty massive lulls on both sides of the ball. So I think that to me is the biggest question mark with both of these teams. Are they going to be able to get consistent enough to not find themselves in 2, 3, 4 touchdown holes against the likes of Baylor, TCU, and against each other? I think that's a real big question as they move into these really tough games to end their seasons.
Ryan, Jenny brings up the consistency question. It's sort of been something different every time with the Sooners. Of course, nothing really you can shake a stick at when it comes to what they did in Manhattan, but their problems against Texas, they've had problems defending the pass, they've had problems running the ball. I mean, what meaningful things do you take away from this comparison, this odd comparison? I think it's going to go on for a couple of weeks because the common foes opportunity for comparisons continues.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think the biggest thing for Oklahoma is just being able to do some of the things that they've struggled with at times. They've struggled to start well. They've struggled to run the football. They've struggled to, like you said, defend the pass against a passing team. Now, this week we'll get to see a little bit more of how far the pass defense has come since that game against Tulsa a few weeks ago in non-conference play. But the Sooners have to be more consistent across the board. I've got a lot of questions about Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State's won their games. Oklahoma hasn't been able to, and they've got to figure out a way to do some of the things that they haven't been doing to be successful in November when they've got TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State back to back to back.
Okay, Barry, we're talking about that gauntlet in November, TCU, Baylor, and then the Bedlam game itself. But what is it that these teams? Are we going to know any more about them between now and then that really tells us something about who could win Bedlam?
Oh, I think so, and primarily because of Texas Tech. Sooners have them tomorrow. Cowboys have them a week from tomorrow. And Texas Tech despite its many problems, is an excellent offensive team, can really throw the ball around. And we're going to find out how the Sooners and Cowboys are set up to stop the passing games of Baylor and TCU. So I think that's going to be especially with TCU and Tech run virtually identical offenses. So I think it's going to be very, very instructive to see how OU and OSU do against Texas Tech.
Barry, you're ready to say right now that the Cowboys are the better team of the two?
No, I actually think OU is probably a better team. Cowboys have not all played that well. I do think OSU's got some things they can improve upon that could elevate them past Oklahoma, especially with the home field advantage. But I'd say that right now, for the totality of the season, OSU has not played as well as OU, but they've been more consistent in that they didn't lay any clunkers, and OU laid a clunker.
Jenny, who's the better team between these two?
It's a great question. If we're talking and they played each other today, I'd probably pick OSU to win. They've just shown a lot when it comes down to, getting through tough situations. I mean, we saw them go to Texas and win. We saw them go to West Virginia and win. I think those are two really, especially West Virginia, really tough places to go and win. We saw them win at night in Morgantown on homecoming weekend, so a crowd that was really fired up. I was down on the field the last 6 or so minutes of regulation and the overtime. Just a lot of energy going against the Cowboys, and yet they found ways to win. So I think I'd probably go with Oklahoma State right now. Just as Barry pointed out in his column today, at the top of the list was resiliency, and you can't argue against the resiliency of the Cowboys in tough situations. They've found ways to win. So I think I would go with them in a defense that I think has been more consistent defending all kinds of offenses in the league. I think I would go Oklahoma State right now.
Ryan, a lot of great similarities I really hadn't thought of that Barry brought out. Both have good pass rushes. Neither can run the ball to any effect in any way to influence the outcome of a game. So they're both struggling there. The game is in Stillwater. Which way would you come down if you had to pick today?
Well, before the season, I thought Oklahoma State would finish ahead of Oklahoma. I think I'd probably flip that right now. I think Oklahoma has been more consistent. Oklahoma State has benefited from their schedule to this point. But Oklahoma has also been able to go on the road and be successful. We saw them pull out a win against Tennessee late in the game in a very tough environment. They went to Manhattan and just destroyed the Wildcats on the road. So I like their chances on the road to end the season in Stillwater.
That Tennessee game. Not a Big 12 game, and no comparison there, but that does loom pretty large. Tennessee, of course, has had
in defense of OSU's won more conference road games than OU has. They've each won. OU's won one, OSU's won two. So I think the Cowboys have proven themselves on the road as well.
Okay, Barry, along those lines, so since we got Ryan here, let's stick with the Sooners and Tech. Saturday, 2:30, a couple 2:30 games. We'll be kicking off at the same time, hopefully finishing around the same time. Barry, what are you setting your upset alert at for the Tech OU game?
Not very high. I don't see where Tech's defense will put up much of a fight against Oklahoma. Well, I think the Sooners have a fighting chance to at least slow Patrick Mahomes. I heard somebody from Lubbock talking this week. They think it's just automatic that OU is going to run wild on Tech. And the Sooners haven't been running well, but Tech historically and this season has been very poor against the run. So I think there's a good chance Samaje Perine gets loose and he has a big game. He had a big game in Lubbock last year. That's been a problem for the Sooners, although they've actually been running a little bit better in conference play than in before conference play. So I think OU will run pretty well and probably win, not in a blowout, but with relative ease.
Jenny, the last two times Tech came to Norman, it was tough times for the Sooners, one of which I believe you wrote a column and we put a big gigantic headline over it that said overrated, and it wasn't until late in that game that the Sooners pulled it out. Of course, I don't even think Tech won a meaningful game thereafter, so vindication.
Unless you're counting the Arizona State game.
Until the bowl, then they won a pretty big one.
Our old
Yeah.
friend Gina Mizell might say that was meaningful. I don't know, though.
Yeah. Well, anyway, how do you see? What's your upset alert for the Sooners on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm picking Oklahoma to win by a couple touchdowns, but I think that Texas Tech, it's a passing offense that is going to test this Oklahoma secondary, and we really haven't seen them tested since that Tulsa game. Clearly, having Jordan Thomas is big. I think we're now seeing just what his role in the secondary is, and it's as a fairly significant cornerback for that group. You didn't have him against Texas, so that or against Tulsa, that was obviously a big absence there. But, West Virginia, while they're Dana Holgerson offense, they don't run the air raid like we've seen Dana Holgerson run it in the past. They're more of a run-first air raid offense. Obviously Texas and Kansas State more running teams than passing teams. So I think Tech, in the way that they throw it, I think that they are going to test the secondary maybe as much as any team has this season. And that's going to be a real question. How do they stand up and play? How does Mike Stoops' defense approach this game? Can they get pressure on Mahomes? Can they force the issue a little bit and help the secondary out? I think that's going to be a real question. So I do have Oklahoma winning by double digits, but at the same time, if that Tech offense gets rolling and the Oklahoma defense starts to flounder and question itself, I think it'll be interesting to see, can they rally, can they get it back under control?
Ryan, every time I hear Barry talk about the OU secondary, upcoming tests from Baylor, the way the teams are getting stressed horizontally, I start thinking he's going to tell me the upset alert should be high. But no, he set it low. Sort of thinks the Sooners could run the ball a little bit better on Tech. Where do you come down on this?
Yeah, I agree with Barry. I think it's going to be low. I think because of Texas Tech's run defense has not been good at all this year. I believe it's the worst in the Big 12 by a decent margin. I think Oklahoma is going to be able to have some success up front. They're going to get guys like Samaje Perine, Joe Mixon, maybe even Daniel Brooks going a little bit in the run game, and that'll open some things up for them in the passing game as well. But I do think Texas Tech is going to be the biggest challenge of the season to this point for Oklahoma's secondary. With Jordan Thomas back there, it's going to be really interesting to see how they're able to defend the pass. I think that's going to be the biggest takeaway from this as far as looking toward the future, looking toward that critical stretch. But I don't think there's much of a chance for Texas Tech to pull off this upset on Saturday.
Okay, Jenny, let's talk about the Oklahoma State Cowboys. You're a representative covering that game. What meaningful can the Cowboys accomplish Saturday against Kansas?
Well, I think that as much as anything, they need to figure out something in the run game, something on first down. Those two seemingly go hand in hand, as Oklahoma State has decided that it has to run the ball on first down. I'm not exactly sure why, but they have got to figure out something consistent in both of those areas. They can't keep putting Mason Rudolph in the offense in second and long and especially third and long situations. They've lucked out in the fact that Mason Rudolph is pretty darn good on third down. If he weren't, they would really be in a world of hurt offensively. But he's been fairly outstanding on third down to save their bacon on a regular basis. But they've got to get more on first down. They've got to get more out of the run game. And if the run game doesn't start producing, I think they're going to have to go to that short passing game. Almost see it as a long handoff to get the ball out in space and let some guys, even if it's 3 or 4 yards, I think that's got to be seen as a win after what we've seen. I was joking around. I was sitting next to Ryan last week at Manhattan for the K-State game with OU, and anytime OU would get anything even measurable in the run game, 4, 5, 6 yards, it sort of perked me up because those type of runs with the OSU run game, which I've seen the last couple weeks before that game, that would have been a long run. They've just not gotten anything out of their run game more than a couple yards a pop. So they got to figure out a way to get at least 4 or 5, maybe occasionally 6 or 7 yards out of the running plays, and we just haven't seen it consistently out of them at all. If you can't do it against Kansas, who are you going to do it against?
Speaking of if you can't do it against Kansas, Barry, on Tuesday, and what I saw is a blatant attempt to reduce her intake of male material from the University of Kansas Alumni Association. Jenny proclaimed the Jayhawks the worst team in Big 12 history. I think that was it.
Yep.
Barry, do you concur, and do you think there's anything meaningful that can come out of the game Saturday for the Cowboys?
Well, I was very disappointed to hear that, because that really is hurting my campaign to get Jackie O inducted into the KU Journalism Hall of Fame. So, I mean, you get roadblocks like that, and you just don't know what to do with it. So
We're truth tellers out of the William Ellen White School of Journalism, Barry.
Here's what needs to happen. If KU will go ahead and get beat by 40 the rest of the year, maybe I can use truth as a defense. You know what? To me, it comes at a great time. KU coming along the pike for OSU for the reasons we talked about. Get some things fixed. Figure out how to do some things different. And we saw in 2013 an OSU team that was just, pretty good early, went to West Virginia, didn't play well, lost. But then they caught some momentum, and by the end of the season, they were the Big 12's best team and really should have won the league title. They just sort of had some bedlam mishaps and lost that game in the 10-degree weather. But I want to see the same kind of improvement out of this bunch from Stillwater as I did 2 years ago. And this is a great time to do it. When you're at Texas and things go wrong, and when you're playing Kansas State and things aren't going great, and then you go to West Virginia and you're fighting for your life, you're really just trying to keep your head above water. And if you need to quick kick, if you need to run J.W. Walsh down after, whatever you do to win, you have to do. But against Kansas, that's not the case. You can experiment. You can try some new things. And I think they need to use this week as a way to try to fix some problems. So I think this is a very good time. To me, it's a much better schedule. They got KU this week, at Tech next week. It's much better going in that sequence than otherwise, because Lubbock can be a tough place to play. You get fortified and maybe go to Lubbock next week with some answers to the questions.
Barry brought up the name J.W. Walsh, Jenny. We had a note on this today. It sounded like Mike Gundy is talking about fixing his running game and perhaps running more J.W. Walsh. So let me ask you to finish this question. More J.W. Walsh for the Cowboys means what?
Well, I mean, it could mean positive things. I mean, we've seen just how effective the Walsh package has been, the washing machine, the power Walsh, whatever you want to call it. The effectiveness of that specialty package has been really high for the Cowboys. So I do think that, the early returns on it have been good. Now the question becomes, if you start running it, more sort of in the middle of the field, they've run it mostly down in, the red zone around the goal line. If you start running it more, midfield or on the other side of midfield, do you run the risk of of your opposing defense saying, well, we know what's going to happen now. It's just going to be a running play, and they stuff it. But you also have the flip side of that J.W. Walsh just seems to be able to find little creases within, the defense to put himself through and get you 4 or 5 yards, which again, as I mentioned before, would be a huge running play for this Cowboy offense. I think that I tend to think more J.W. Walsh would be a good thing for the offense, just from the standpoint of, just how poorly they have run the ball. But again, I would say if you're not going to give J.W. Walsh the ball to maybe get the running game going a little bit, that short passing game, Mike Gundy said it a few weeks ago, they haven't had a quarterback over the last couple of years who they felt comfortable enough throwing the ball in those short yardage situations on a regular basis. He thinks they do now. I think that they should try that because, you want to keep Mason Rudolph out there. You want to keep him as part of it, keep the defense guessing, use your wide receivers who are your best position group on that team. Why not get the ball into those hands a little bit more? I think that could be the strategy that gets the run game going, if you will, for the Cowboys.
Barry, I've got a theory I want to throw out you someday when we have a writers meeting that's short. We don't last very long. Maybe it's a 30-minute. We want to stretch it out a little bit.
Wait. When is that going to happen? And who can we see about that?
I don't know. We're going to work on that. But anyway, here's my theory. The Belldozer brought an end to OU's era of explosive offense. I think it really curtailed. I think when they ran into some goal line problems, The Belldozer was a good patch, but it really didn't. It brought to me the draw the curtain down on the air raid, draw the curtain down on OU's explosive passing attack, and really said, hey, we can't do this very good anymore. We have to have a crutch. My question is more Power Walsh good for the Cowboys in the same way?
Well, first of all, I think you probably need to go have a nice course on cause and effect. I don't see any relation at all between the Belldozer and OU's lack of explosive offense. I actually think that the one shining light in OSU's offense this season has been J.W. Walsh. And I think it's been very effective, and I think it saved their bacon in a lot of ways. And I think it's something they can build on going forward, because Mason Rudolph, while I love him and he's had some great moments, he also hasn't played as well as I thought he would. I mean, his interceptions are up. He's going to have to tone that down. I still think he's going to be an outstanding quarterback, and in some ways already is. And Jackie O was right. Strength of this team is the core of wide receivers. Very effective, very strong. A lot of different guys to throw to. But I think when you got a guy like Walsh and you use him, and you use him even in more ways than just the way OU used the Belldozer, when you use him as much as OSU has, and maybe more so, it stresses a defense during the week of preparation. And I think with OSU using Walsh this way, it really hamstrings defensive coordinators who have to spend a lot of time on defending the option and the power run game and the goal line offense by OSU, that takes away from the time they can spend working on those slants and those myriad pass routes that Marcel Aitman and Jawan Seals and David Glidden and all those guys are running. So I think Walsh has been fantastic for OSU. I would use him more. I think coaches for too long, particularly the last 20 years, coaches have shied away from two quarterback systems. And I think there's no reason why it can't work. It's worked in the past. It still works from time to time currently when people try it. So I like the extended use of J.W. Walsh.
I like that the way of thinking, Barry. To paraphrase John Goodman in Raising Arizona, so many gadgets to prepare for, so little time. I mean, it really does stress. Gives people one more thing to work on, and I've heard other coaches talk about this. However, in defense of my Belldozer theory, I will remind you of this: confidence is a big factor, and I really felt like when the emphasis became on the Belldozer, there was a lot of confidence in the way Landry Jones was moving that team that seemed to be drained out of the offense, seemed to drain out of the Sooners. Don't dismiss the idea of confidence. I may be wrong about this, but there's some things you guys have been wrong about. And I just wondered this far into the season, if we would close right now, maybe with a little confession being good for the souls, what's the thing that you were most wrong about, either in your preseason picks, in your weekly predictions? Some of you have been missing quite a few of those. I've checked the standings. So anyway, I just thought, and we'll start with you, Ryan. Anything you want to come clean on?
My Heisman pick was absolutely awful this year. I thought that Johnson, the quarterback from Auburn, would come out of nowhere and do fantastic things and lead the Tigers to a college football playoff appearance and the Heisman Trophy, and he no longer has a job. So
And he didn't have one by the second week of the season.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a slow process. It was a very quick offing.
Jenny, come clean. What were you most wrong about?
Well, it wasn't my Heisman pick, but like Ryan, I thought highly of Auburn. So here's my 4 teams to make the playoffs: Auburn,
Oregon,
Oregon, Ohio State, TCU. As we all know, the Tigers off the list. As we all know, the Ducks off the list. So I've got 2 teams that I'm putting all my hopes in: Ohio State, TCU. I have no idea if they'll get it done, but yeah, but the 2 that I lost like right away too. So that it was almost like ripping off a Band-Aid. I didn't feel bad; they were gone so fast.
Barry, Jenny, and Ryan have ripped off the Band-Aid. They're free. They're free. Their conscience are free. How about you?
Well, first of all, let me say that I've found out in life that generally speaking, if you make your predictions before the events happen, they're much more difficult than after the results. If we want to start predicting after the results, then my percentage is going to go up. I had Oregon too, so if on a national basis, Oregon has let me down. Locally, my biggest, this wasn't a prediction. I wrote about it some, but I thought the OSU offensive line would stage a renaissance, and I thought they would be much improved, and they haven't been. They haven't been much better than last year. So to me, that's a major concern, and with no apparent sign of improving right now. Jackie O talked about the running game. The protection for Mason Rudolph has been up and down. So I don't know. That the offensive line I thought would be much better at OSU. It has not been. That's what I've missed most on a game prediction. I've missed the last 3 OU games. But when I picked West Virginia and K-State to beat OU, I was really just looking for a Big 12 upset special. I didn't have any kind of insight. But let me tell you what. At the Cotton Bowl, I picked Sooners to win 45-12, and I was not wrong. I picked the game correctly. Texas stinks. They still stink. I said it in August. Texas stinks. Texas stinks. OU just didn't show up that day. So I'm not going to go with any in-game predictions as being overtly wrong.
I'm not sure that was much. I'm not sure that was much absolution by Barry.
No, it
Was it?
No, I was going to say. You guys came clean. You ripped the Band-Aid off. Barry put the Band-Aid back on.
I'm not. Do you know how confessional works, Barry?
I do know how confessional works, and I reject it out of hand.
All right, I'll do it for all of us. You guys Ryan. You took my Auburn. Now I didn't pick him. A guy who ended up a backup in week 2. And no, I did not pick that kind of guy to win a Heisman. But I had the Oregon problem. I think I had the Auburn problem. I'm not looking at it right now. But you know what? The one that still sticks to me is DGB from last year. I said he'd be the best Sooner. He never stepped foot on the field. In fact, before the section even came out, he was in James Hardenville. So yeah, confession is good. Well, listen, some of us, the come clean portion, 3 out of the 4 is not bad. Maybe we can get the other guy to come clean next week. Hey, that's all. That's all for Football Friday, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman. Have a great Saturday.